Okay, I'm going to introduce each of the persons. First, I'm going to introduce Pablo Lobato. So Pablo is coming out.
Hi everybody.
And then I'm going to introduce some guy you guys have never heard of, Henry Selick.
Thanks much.
Okay, I'm going to do a quick rundown. Pablo's from Argentina. You won't be able to tell from his accent. And he studied painting and engraving in school and decided to do, after working graphic art for a while, became a portrait artist, a caricaturist of unbelievable skill. And has worked for all the magazines and newspapers and things like that. He lives in Buenos Aires, right? Yeah. So there you go. Henry Selick is a crazy person. And he's won a lot of awards. He, of course, was responsible for Nightmare for Christmas, and also Coraline, and also James and the Giant Peach. And then this one is really good. It's based on an original story, almost a book. Didn't quite make it to be a book, but it was based on his children, his two sons. And Netflix decided to work with you guys on it. And then Jordan Peele came on as the co-producer, co-writer. Is that right? We'll talk more about that. And now we're going to ask some questions. Generally, what I like to do is ask a few questions, kind of get everything going, and then I'll probably ask for maybe some questions from the audience. If that happens, I'll ask you to raise your hand, talk really loud, and then I'll repeat the question, okay? So let's get started. So Henry, how did this start?
My grown sons used to be little demons. And, you know, George especially, he was in his diapers and Harry was a little older. And I just happened to do a sketch of them as demon brothers and with horns. One was the short-horn demon, one was the long-horn demon. And then I wrote a 7-page short story about demon brothers who come to the land of the living to strike it rich. And a lot of the characters in the final movie originated there. The demon brothers, Sister Helly, Kat Elliot, Raoul, Manberg, who was Mandrake, Buffalo Belzer was Bub Belzer, Redneck of Darkness, and raising the dead to make money. But I didn't do anything with it. My manager, Ellen Goldsmith-Vane, who's also a producer on this film with her company, Gotham Group, she would bug me every few years. What about that? That could be a movie. I'll try to go a little quicker. But it was just put away. I got to do Coraline. I got to make exactly the film I wanted to make. You don't always get to do that. And afterwards, I did get another project going, but it was kind of a collision of viewpoints, differing opinions. It was called The Shadow King. It was with Disney and Pixar. It ultimately got out of control, and they shut that down. And I was probably resigned to not making another one of these stop-motion films. They're hard to get up and going. But in 2012, suddenly there's this new show on Comedy Central, Key and Peele. I started watching. I thought that Keegan-Michael Key and Jordan Peele were the two most talented sketch artists of all time, ever. And by the third season, I just figured I'm going to reach out. Who knows? Maybe I could get another movie going. I could work with them, certainly doing voices. And so I did, and they were both interested, but Jordan wanted to meet face to face, and it turned out that he was a total nut about stop-motion animation. He knew all about it. He actually studied puppetry in college. So, and after pitching the story and him reading the pages, he said, I'm setting up this new company, Monkey Paw Productions. He told me about the kinds of films they wanted to make for animation, the kind of films where he wished he could have seen as a kid, with people like himself in lead positions on screen. And he was very convincing. I totally welcomed him to come on as a co-collaborator, as a co-creator. And so he ended up being a co-writer of the screenplay and a producer. And this is all before Get Out. I'd read the script, thought it was great, and then when Get Out, we had to go. I got to go off and make this little movie. And then my movie's coming out in a week. We better go out and set up Wendell Wild. What if my movie's a bomb? Well, we didn't do that.
It wasn't a bomb.
It wasn't a bomb. And then we only took it to a couple of places after that. And Netflix was the best because they promised to make it, not just pretend or develop it. And so it's a long time from meeting them, 2015 till now. But I know it's a long story, but that's how it was grown into the movie.
So when you met Jordan, and he was so excited about doing this project, this is pre-Get Out, and it wasn't really greenlit until after Get Out. It was greenlit after that. So how many, was that 2 years about from the time you met him till the time that happened?
Yeah, I can't remember what year we first presented. It might have been, whenever Get Out came out, is that 2017? It was a few months after that we finally got our pitch package together. I had already contacted Pablo because I wanted the demons to be caricatures of Wendell Wild, and Key and Peele weren't convinced. They were worried that could look stupid, but I had reached out to Pablo, had already done brilliant caricatures, and they were sold. So we had our little package together and then took it, I don't know, it was 2017, 2018.
So Pablo, so you get this, what do you get, a phone call from this person you don't know, and it says you want to make a movie together?
No, exactly. I received an email, not a phone call.
Email.
Yeah, I was in my studio in Buenos Aires, working for magazines and things like that, and I received this email from this guy called Henry Selick, and I thought, my first thought, well, okay, that's funny. He has the same name that the director of, Nightmare Before Christmas.
That's a very common name, of course.
Well, so I took a look at the email, and actually it was Henry Selick. So, and then I thought, okay, he must be confused because I don't know why he's inviting me to do a movie. I don't know. He maybe we are a lot of Pablos, so maybe it's an animator called Pablo. But I say yes. I was going to be in CTN here in LA, and Henry was going to be there too. So we met there, and he told me about this movie, and I really loved the idea. I warned him, okay, are you sure you want to work with me? I never did anything in animation, so he said yes. So okay, let's do it. Let's do it, and here we are.
If you've ever seen any Pablo's work, it's very graphic and very 2D. It's all for print usually. What made you decide, besides the fact that the caricatures are unbelievably good, was that it, or did either of you worry about the fact that you were going to end up doing 2D work that was going to be 3D or stop motion?
At that point, I wasn't worried because I just had to convince Keegan-Michael and Jordan that it was a good idea. So I just wanted to work with the best caricaturist, the most artistic caricaturist, and then I just figured, well, we'll solve that huge problem later.
And how did you solve that huge problem?
We worked together, a lot of back and forth as I learned about how much Pablo could do, which turned out to be anything and everything. Because he was learning along the way, but initially came up with sort of a plan for the underworld. The demons, their faces would be very bas-relief, almost flat, a certain amount of dimension to catch some light, and I worked with incredible sculptors. This guy Damon Bard, who I've worked with for decades, and later Ben Adams as well, who learned to interpret Pablo's work beautifully. But initially it was going to be, okay, characters in this world will be more flat, like the souls of the danged, and other things. And that was for a test in summer of 2018. Netflix wanted, and spent decent money. They wanted to see what the movie would look like. So rather than just a test, I took a scene that I thought could be in the film. It's when you first meet the demons and they're planting hair plugs. and so forth. So we threw together, puppets. A lot of people from Bix Pix helped us out, and Sarah Serrata was producing that test. So we threw something together and found that looked really good, the bas-relief demon faces, and it really captured his work. But as time went on, I realized that look could wear out its welcome if every character in the whole movie always had it. And then we went into the interesting, arduous process of holding on to Pablo's designs in 3D, and we started having him do character turnarounds, which was a totally foreign thing to him. And then, sometimes what looks great in a profile, you can't translate to what's front. But we didn't make that his problem. Why don't you tell us more about how you adapted going from...
Yeah, at first I was very concerned about that, because I couldn't imagine how these flat images will translate into 3D puppets. But so I was thinking all the time, how can I do? But at some point I decided, okay, this is not my problem. No, I say, because I was trying to work in 3D, but I found out that kind of limit my work. So I say, okay, Henry called me because he saw my illustration, so I have to do what I always do, because I think this is what he liked about it. So I did that. I did my thing, and gave them these flat images and go, okay, let's see what you can do. And they did this amazing job. So there was only a thing that I added myself to 3D, was I did kind of a research of my illustrations had this kind of cubist thing, this cubist meets pop thing. So I started to research about what cubist guys did with 3D. So I went to see some Picasso sculptures or things like that, and I found out that Picasso was a huge fan of African mask. So I dig there, and I found like a lot of beautiful art, very stylish, very simple, and very geometric too. So I say, okay, maybe we can do something with that. And actually, that's where the face of Kat came from. From an African mask.
I wondered when because you said Key and Peele were not exactly. They weren't sure about caricatures at the beginning. They weren't sure that was a good idea. When you showed them Pablo's caricatures of them, did that sell them right away?
Yeah, pretty much. Keegan's a little more vain than Jordan. He'd admit it in a minute. So he kept having trouble with the length of his demon neck. And it's very long. It's like a leg, but we scaled it down a little. But yeah.
He was okay with the tail and the horns and all that stuff. Okay.
Yeah, no, that bringing on Pablo solved that problem.
That's great. I noticed that in the underworld, when they are more 2D, that when Ub Iwerks and Disney invented Mickey Mouse, they never turned his ears, as you guys probably know. His ears are always front ways, and
he's like this. He moves his head.
Yeah. And also in their Key and Peele caricatures in the underworld, there's two of them. There's one on the left side, and then there's on the right side, and that kind of is the way it worked. Worked great.
Yeah, I love taking chances, and it was a challenge to translate. But it was what we had to start with was so damn good. We weren't going to fail.
Right. Now, speaking of, and the other thing I noticed, well, you said, Henry, a little while ago that Jordan hadn't ever seen a stop-motion film with people that looked like him. I don't think he meant looks like me personally, but we're of color, of some. And watching the film, I realized that almost all the characters in that are of some marginalized community. In one way or another, ethnic or religious or something, they're marginalized. So was that part of the deal of getting this done?
It was, some of Jordan's first comments in when we met and he wanted to propose being creative partners and so forth. I wanted to hear his ideas, and the first thing he said was what we've both said, like his company, Monkey Paw, what kind of films they make, and the personal story of wishing he'd seen himself represented. So that was like a beginning, and it went from there to, he felt that Sister Helly, who was originally the protagonist, and Kat and Raoul became like her assistants in the original short story. He said, no, it's got to be Kat. I think it'll be more successful. People can care a little more about her. I said, I'm a little worried because of Coraline, I don't want to repeat myself. He said, well, you wouldn't be repeating yourself if she was a person of color. And I said, totally true. And he said, you could pick. I said, she's going to be African American. And just from that moment forward, it was like unlocking a door to the whole film. Gave this freedom of how we would design characters and what ethnicities, and even this whole community, which you don't really get to see because it's been destroyed. It was burned down, but you get to see a few of the undead brew workers, a working class community with a lot of people of color that was very successful until the factory got burned down. So that was the key that unlocked the door to this. It wasn't like, we'll be the most inclusive animated film ever. It was just like a bigger world to play with, a better set of paints and colors.
I ask this question when I'm doing other Q&As with the more traditional, if you want to say, stop motion is the most traditional. It's probably the oldest of animation techniques, but of CG, and they all said, well, almost always say, well, when COVID hit, we all went to our homes and we turned our computers, and within a week or 2 weeks, we were up and running again, and it was a different way to do it, but in a challenge. But in stop motion, you can't do that. You can't send everybody home and here's a set that you can move to their house. And so what happened for that 18 months or 2 years?
Luckily certain people could keep going. Pablo, for example,
Yeah.
and we had a very, very large cast. We could keep going in the story department with storyboards and reels. We found ways to continue recording voices remotely. I mean, it did get to a point where Lyric Ross, who performs the voice of Kat, had to go into her closet. Netflix bought this kit to her house, and she went in the closet with a professional mic and so forth. It's kind of funny, but we were desperate to keep going. But a certain percentage of people could keep working, but a lot couldn't. And we just found ways to try to make progress, and we sent the animators home with puppets and systems to capture them to practice. So like the very last thing you see in the film here was Juan with his at-home puppet telling a little story and getting familiar with bringing little Kat to life.
So how long were you out before you could start again, start doing stop motion again?
It was a hard out of 8 months, but more like a year. Mm-hmm. And then coming back to work, it was like having handcuffs on because it wasn't like, hey, COVID's over. It was, masks all the time, social distancing, new air filtering systems, and so on. I mean, so it was, stop motion is not the easiest way to make animation. No animation's easy, we know that. It's certainly among the hardest, but all those extra things just, it was like having leg weights on. It did ultimately, the fact that we soldiered on through everything, and there's other problems we face, like wildfires up in Portland that came so close to the studio that we had to do a puppet evacuation, for real. We had a heat dome where we were the hottest place on Earth for a week. On and on and on, but we had a bonding of the crew beyond anything I've ever worked on. And by the end, my biggest fear was disappointing the crew of the film. I really had to believe that they would love this movie they'd given so much to. I cared more about them than Netflix or the world. And they liked the film.
Just by serendipity, when they premiered at Animation is Film the other night, I got to sit next to Pablo. We'd never met, but I knew who he was. And I watched him watch the film for the first time complete, right? So how was that, Pablo?
Oh, it was great. It was. I see you laughing. Yeah. So yeah, for me it was super exciting and kind of emotional too. And I was all the time thinking, at the first beginning, I was thinking about the details of my designs and translate into 3D. But it was like, I don't know, the first 10 minutes. And then I was just watching the movie, you know? Yeah. So, and laughing with the jokes, and it was so cool. I really, it's a moment that I'm gonna appreciate for the rest of my life, I think.
So I'm going to try and take a few questions. I'm going to ask you to raise your hands, and I'm looking in the back and seeing, I can't see all the way to the back, but yeah, there, okay. Let's take this fellow right here in the baseball cap. The answer is a fishbone was represented in a lot of T-shirts and so forth. Whose idea was that?
I directed a music video of Fishbone in 1985. Party at Ground Zero. And so, I mean, you know, I am, you know, not a great musician, but I'm a musician, and I know a lot about the music world. But that's what happened, and I became familiar with a lot of the black and brown punk bands of the 70s and 80s back then. We certainly got some great ideas for the other groups that we have from Jordan and company. Fishbone's on me.
I have a little trivia thing to tell you about. He got fired from a job in a bar when you were playing piano. Isn't that correct?
I was. They were trying to be upscale, and I was bringing in an unsavory crowd.
Surprise, surprise. Basically, there's lots of subplots and threads. How did you manage to balance all those together?
You know, I don't get the opportunity to do these movies that often, and at this point in my life, I wanted there to be more complexity, a little more reality to balance out the fantasy. So there's several through lines, and I would say that was one of the advantages of having so much extra time, because it was, I'd say I'm really good at this sort of balancing act, how spooky, how scary versus how funny, how emotional. It's kind of in every film I've done in a growing sort of way. It's almost like the Harry Potter books. Each one got a little darker and more complex as the audience grew, the writer grew. And so I think I'm pretty good at balancing, but in this case, all that extra time gave added opportunity to fine-tune and fit this all together. Jordan, I sometimes call him the tone master, because he wasn't available all the time. You know, he was very available early on, and then he went off. He made 3 movies while we made 1, but he'd come back, and then he was so good at knowing, you know, you're raising a flag here you probably don't want to. How about we tone that down so that this through line can be paramount? So he was enormously helpful. You know, the people from Gotham, Lindsay Williams and Ellen were great, and Wynn Rosenfeld, who's one of Jordan's partners, creative partners and a childhood friend at his studio. He was very involved with the ideas and the writing. So we had a really good team to iron out the wrinkles and get a through line that could carry all this weight.
There you go. What happens do you decide everything ahead of time, or do things kind of happen while you're working on the show that may change things? I think is that fair? Is that a fair way to say it? Yeah.
You know, I'd like to think most of you or many of you are from the animation world. I mean, it is ASIFA. And we kind of know it's animated features. They usually have much better budgets and take more time, and they tend to change more. They have faster schedule, and then there's lower budget, faster things where there's a script and it gets boarded and you stick to it. This was a feature, and I know a lot of people who, studios coming into animation that haven't done it before, of course they want a locked script, and that's the movie. But we know the shooting script is always going to be the story reels. And so, you know, you want to do a great script, it just never works out in animation. Even the lowest budget, the real movie's going to be planned in the story reels, storyboards, and that's where you make the movie first in a feature. It's the cheaper way to make the whole movie with voice work and temp music, and you get to shove it around, change the jokes, you know, beat it up, beat it down. And during that process, there'll be a lot of rewrites. But even then, now there's some studios, I know that Pixar got to a point where they can lock those reels, and they now have an army of geniuses to put it into production, and it comes out the other side, and there's been practically no changes. But for this film, we go into production, and even what was the funniest joke in a storyboard, you find it doesn't work visually. You got to come up with something else. So there's a lot of, I mean, it's about not shutting yourself off to opportunities and addressing things that worked in the one medium, the hand-drawn storyboards that don't work. So we're fussing and changing right up to the end where we took the scene of Kat losing her parents, which used to be a flashback for a long, long time, putting that right up front. Writing some voiceover dialogue to just help some of the audience members be able to follow Kat's journey. And I don't mind that. I don't want to have, here's the plan, and then we just robotically follow it. I love that it lives and breathes to the very last second. We're not allowed to change anything else.
So Pablo, did he throw you some curveballs too?
Sorry?
did you know, I'm done with this, and then suddenly there was more to do?
Yeah. That happened all the time, yeah. But because, you know, I was like a lot of work during weeks and weeks, and then stop. And there's again a lot of work, but it was I never expected, so it was always a surprise for me. That's cool.
We all know the world's changed. You know, Wakanda Forever. It's going to be a monster hit film. It's been proven that people are receptive to good stories with good characters, and you know, color really doesn't matter. It's stupid to be limited. Going into this, working with Jordan and his company and their own researchers, Pablo and I, we research to death, and we work with other people. We want to always be truthful. We want to do as much as we can to represent the characters accurately. Not worry so much about that it like limits who they are. But we take it very seriously, and then we figure we've done the research. Now let's play and grow a story and characters that have meaning, that anybody can get emotionally involved with. Do you want to talk about your sorts of research?
Yeah, we research a lot, and we try a lot of things, a lot of different things. So there's characters like Belzer or Father Bess, or that we try everything. No, it doesn't matter the color of the guy. We try everything. So it could be Belzer, could be Asian, could be black, could be white. We try everything, and I feel that was so great to we don't care about the color of the character. So I think that was the very best way to deal with this thing.
We don't have time for any more. I have a couple things. The guys are going to come down here for a few minutes. If you want to say hello to them. We're going to have to limit anything to us. If you want them to sign something, one. or a selfie. One, not both, one, because they got a lot of more things to do today, and there's a lot of people who might want to say hello to them. So, guys, I think you should probably go down there. But before they do, let's thank them, Pablo and Henry, for being here.
Thank you very much. I'm really happy. I hope you like the movie.